Good morning, and welcome to Christ in St. Luke's, to the nave here at Christ in St. Luke's. We are here today at the invitation of Rabbi Michael Panitz, who is an old friend of this community. We call him our rabbi in residence here. He's been a member of this community for a number of years, and we're happy to welcome him today to speak about, in the aftermath of the Texas hostage situation, to speak on the subject of anti-Semitism, what Christians need to know about it, and what Christians are able to do about it. Rabbi Michael is the rabbi at Temple Israel here in Norfolk on Granby Street. He is also an adjunct professor at Old Dominion University and Virginia Wesleyan University, where he teaches religious studies and Hebrew language. And he has been the rabbi at Temple Israel for 30 years and a good friend and member of Christ in St. Luke's for a number of years. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, my friends. Two weeks ago, a man traveled 5,000 miles looking for a synagogue to attack. He came to the door of a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, posing as a man in need. The rabbi invited him in and made him a cup of tea. Once inside, he brandished a firearm, holding the rabbi and the congregants captive for nearly 12 hours. I would not be speaking to you today if this were some sort of one-off, or if this were fully explained by the assailant's mental problems. This is part of a pattern. To illustrate this pattern, I will share a few snapshots of the current scene. Then I will analyze the historical causes of this sickness of the soul. Our delving into history is not caused by antiquarian curiosity. Our histories shape our default assumptions. Understanding the history can help us come to know what actions we might take to heal ourselves and our society. As measured by watchdog agencies, in 2021, anti-Semitism was at its peak in the past decade. It's not uniquely an American problem. 50% of the incidents reported in 2021 took place in Europe. But let's focus on the American scene. Within the past few years, anti-Semites have attacked Jews at worship in Pittsburgh, in Poway, California, in Muncie, New York. They've attacked a Jewish kosher supermarket in New Jersey. And they've marched, as you know, in Charlottesville, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." A few days ago, a 21-year-old woman accosted 3 Jewish children on the street in Brooklyn, told them that Hitler should have finished the job of exterminating them. We're talking about 3 children ages 8 and younger. warned them that she knew where they lived, and then spat on the oldest one, the 8-year-old. On Friday, this past Friday, one day after International Holocaust Remembrance Day, Washington's Union Station was defaced with numerous swastikas. For me, the Texas synagogue attack of 15 days ago was a tipping point. For the past half-decade, I've spoken out within the Jewish community about the need to recognize that anti-Semitism is on the rise and that we need to defend against it. Part of this defense, I have long contended, is an outreach to our Christian neighbors. Now I have begun. I thank you for your attention. It so happens that this is the very first congregation at which I have the privilege of speaking, and I think it's appropriate because we have a long-standing relationship. This raises my hopes that my Jewish people are not alone in the face of those who hate us. I will set forth what Christians need to know about anti-Semitism, and I will conclude with a brief indication of what Christians need to do about it. What Christians need to know, here's the outline. First, that anti-Semitism is serious and persistent. Second, that anti-Semitism is protean, adapting to religious and secular worldviews, to right-wing and left-wing political stances, to capitalist and communist societies, and of course to fascist states. Third, that while Christianity did not invent anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism has a particular linkage that we will explore in Christian history. And fourth, that like other forms of bigotry, anti-Semitism thrives on the passivity of the anti-Semitic, of the non-anti-Semitic majority of people. Now, a more detailed examination. Anti-Semitism is serious and persistent. It has endured for over 2 millennia. It has reemerged in new forms over and over again, even after major changes in society and in worldview. It thrived even after the Holocaust in the polarized world of the Cold War, and it has emerged with new tools and added virulence in the contemporary post-Cold War era. One might feel that it is unnecessary to warn that anti-Semitism is serious. But in fact, we see in a number of ways that among the ills of our society is this one. We suffer from an unseemly competition to be what I will call the canonized victim, by which I mean the one whose pain demands a preponderance of sympathy of our fellow humans. Of course, this is absurd. A society devoted to ending bigotry will be like the tide that raises all boats. It'll be good for all. Conversely, a society in which only some group's victimization is worthy of action is one that keeps all ultimately at risk. But absurd or not, there has been a lamentable tendency on the part of some otherwise empathetic actors in our society to have a blind spot to the evil of anti-Semitism. This is not a new problem. Some of today's culture warriors might think that this is an issue of identity politics of the past quarter century. But the prejudicial trope that anti-Semitism is not so serious, that the focus on anti-Semitism is allegedly a Jewish ploy. This trope has a long and ugly history. the canard that by nature Jews are pushy and want to take advantage of their straits to get it to the head of the line, as it were, was part of the shockingly poor treatment of Jewish Holocaust survivors by the British Army administering affairs in Germany in 1945. It was also evident in our American sector, in the callousness of the American Army towards Holocaust survivors. Only the Harrison Report, compiled by President Truman's special envoy, Earl Harrison, spurred the United States into recognizing the gravity of the problem of anti-Semitism still being endured by Holocaust survivors at the hands of their liberators. So if in 1945, people who had fought against the Nazis had a hard time taking anti-Semitism seriously, you might understand that this is an issue today as well. Yes, for centuries, even millennia, anti-Semitism has survived major changes in the political, the social, and the economic, and the intellectual frameworks of life. It doesn't go away. As Daniel Goldhagen, the author of important studies on the complicity of ordinary Germans in the genocidal policies of the Third Reich, has expressed it, anti-Semitism is, quote, the devil that never dies. Second, that anti-Semitism is protean. It's like a chameleon. It is found on the right, where it couples with Christian nationalism. It's found on the left, where it is disguised as anti-Zionism. It thrives both in religious circles and in secular groups. It uses a wide variety of arguments to incite hatred of the Jew. In this regard, I need to refine something that I've said already. Properly speaking, the term anti-Semitism denotes something which began in the late 19th century. The term was coined by a racist and nationalist German, Wilhelm Marr, in 1879. He founded a political party called the Anti-Semitic Party, dedicated to reversing what he regarded as the undue influence of Jews in the Germany of his day. His party won seats in successive German parliamentary elections throughout the late 1800s. And in 1892, his party was adopted by one of the two major parties in German political life, the Conservative Party. An important point emerges from this. You should know that the term anti-Semitism was not coined to describe what we correctly call Islamophobia. That is also an evil. Hardly needs to be said, but I'll say that. But that is not what we mean when we use the term anti-Semitism. Attempts to lump the two evils together are sometimes, and be cautious about this, sometimes a polemical tool on the part of those who wish to confuse the focus and give a pass to anti-Jewish themes and actions. To be precise, we could speak of anti-Judaism in pre-modern times and of anti-Semitism in the modern era. What this means is that when religion was the primary way of organizing society, people tended to regard as aliens those who were religious outsiders, infidels, heretics, schismatics. Religious differences were sufficient for the majority to categorize the others as outlaws or enemies. With the secularization of Western society in the 1800s, and with the rise of pseudo-scientific racism, anti-Semitism translated the older religious prejudice against Jews into a racist form of bigotry. Actually, this was a harsher form of bigotry than the older anti-Judaism, because while during the Middle Ages, a Jew could enter the majority culture by embracing Islam or converting to Christianity, a Jew as defined by modern racist ideology could never become part of civilized society. A leopard cannot change its spots. Not that the old prejudices go away when new ones supplement them. Today there are those who hate Jews because Jews have allegedly done away with Christmas. It's kind of rich to think about that, since I myself was here the last time we had an in-person candlelit midnight Christmas Eve service, and I so much enjoyed it with you. And there are those who hate Jews because they're not whites. And there are people who manage to combine both species of hatred. The third point, that while Christianity did not invent anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism has a particular linkage with Christian history. Anti-Semitism existed in Alexandria before the birth of the Christian era. It exists in Japan today, where there is not a major Christian presence, and it is quite virulent in some Muslim circles. So in no sense is anti-Semitism an invention of Christianity. But I want us to understand how Islam, and then more particularly how Christianity, since I'm speaking in a Christian congregation, intersect with anti-Semitic tropes. For the first millennium of Jewish history, after the conclusion of the bulk of the Hebrew Bible, the characteristic political form of Jewish political life was being a member of a minority community within one or another pagan empire. Jews were part of a little community or medium-sized community in the Persian Empire, in one of the Hellenistic successor states to Alexander the Great, in the Roman Empire. With rare exceptions, in those states, the government was tolerant of Judaism. Rulers allowed the Jewish community to regulate its internal affairs. Imperial overlords were mostly concerned about two things: political loyalty and collecting taxes. Jews found they could live under such a regimen. Both Jesus and the rabbis taught that a Jew should render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. Conditions changed fundamentally for Jews when they found themselves ruled over by a rival monotheistic faith. Please think about that phrase, a rival monotheistic faith. We live in an ecumenical time. We think of the church across the street as a partner for blood drives, for sheltering the homeless. Remember, there was a time that people went to war against adherents of the church across the street. Right? They understood in the wrong way what's happening during communion, and that was reason enough to hate them and reason enough to kill them. In that world, Jews were ruled over by members of rival monotheistic faiths. People who felt that the common monotheism is not the bottom line. The bottom line is that you Jews got it wrong. And of course, this refers to Christianity in much of Europe and to Islam in the Middle East, in North Africa, and in southwestern and southeastern Europe. This transformation for the Jewish experience took place between the 4th and 7th centuries of the Common Era, and it defined Jewish life until the 19th century, not so long ago. Since the 19th century, there have been a lot of polemics about which of these two dominant religions, Islam or Christianity, treated its Jewish minority more compassionately. I urge you not to get hung up in that. It's a dead end. Both Christendom and the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, had their ways of denigrating the Jew to reinforce the primacy of the majority culture. First, a look at Islam. The basic worldview, going back to the founding of the religion, regarded enmity towards non-believers as an axiom. That's not a politically correct thing to say, but it's right there in the Quran. In the parts of the world militarily conquered by the armies of Islam, Christians and Jews were allowed to maintain only a second-class status. Their denigration was ritually and legally reinforced by the Jim Crow type provisions of the Pact of Umar. In rare and in exceptional cases, the burden of this status, which was known as dhimmi, protected minority, the burden was lessened. But times of stress would bring a reversion to harsher treatment. Such was the situation in Spain when a fanatical fundamentalist group, the Almohadidun, conquered Al-Andalus in the 12th century and forcibly converted the quote-unquote infidels within their power. This is important because it also has an echo today. Since the 17th century, when Christian states defeated the Ottoman Empire and colonized the heartland of the Arab world, fundamentalist versions of Islam, such as the Wahhabi school, arose. Those schools preached that Allah was allowing the infidel to conquer the faithful because Muslims had become too lax in their piety. The antidote was to return to the full strictness of authentic Islam. Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, and the like are the contemporary incarnations of that spirit. The Wahhabi line of thinking is dominant today in the educational network funded by the Saudi state. It preaches the unreconstructed original sense of jihad. It's not about self-control. It's not about mastering your tongue. It's not about saying no to the jelly donut. It's about warfare. Turning to the treatment of Jews in Christian societies from the 4th through the 19th centuries, we see, just as we see in the history of Islam, an interpenetration of theological and political issues. But the specifics are naturally different. Christianity understands itself in a way that Islam does not, as the fulfillment of Judaism. That makes the continued existence of Jews, unconverted to Christianity, an issue to be reckoned with, maybe even a problem to be addressed. The very first text showing a Christian pondering of this issue is St. Paul's Epistle to the Romans, chapters 9 through 11, in which St. Paul urges Christians to understand that God is able to use the enduring existence of the Jews apart from the church for ultimately good purposes. Gentiles are abandoning their pagan ways and joining the church. The Jews will ultimately get with the program in God's good time. Whatever Paul's theological formulation meant in his day, it was not a statement of Christian political power. Remember that. Christianity only became the state religion of Rome 3 centuries after St. Paul, in the late 300s. In that new situation, 2 of the leading church fathers of the day, St. Augustine and St. John Chrysostom, articulated contrasting answers to the question, what a Christian in power ought to do about the Jew. St. Augustine's position was more widely influential in Latin Christendom until the 12th century. He applied the Cain and Abel story to the question of how Christians ought to regard the Jew. The Jew was Cain. He was the archetypal murderer. Cain killed Abel. The Jew killed Jesus. God punished Cain, sentencing him to wander across the face of the earth. But God also protected Cain. Cain was meant to survive, but in a degraded condition. Following that typology, the Jew was to be permitted in Christian society, but only in a way that made clear his inferiority to Christians. He had a licit but low place in the Christian world. From a Jewish perspective, while Augustine's position was demeaning, the alternative was worse. St. John Chrysostom was a close contemporary of Augustine's. The term Chrysostom means golden mouth, in tribute to his legendary eloquence in preaching. He began his career in Antioch and rose to become Archbishop of Constantinople. While in Antioch, a city with a thriving Jewish community in his day, he delivered a series of homilies against the Jews. That's what they're called, against the Jews. It is possible that the real targets of his preaching were Christians who frequented synagogues to take part in Sabbath and festival services, to hear the ram's horn being sounded on the Jewish New Year. But his writings were widely disseminated and influenced the hardening of anti-Jewish attitudes among Christians. Chrysostom preached the need for Christians to distance themselves from Jews. With Christians in power, this resulted in anti-Jewish social regulations. In the Byzantine Empire, the approach championed by Chrysostom came to be realized in sporadic bouts of persecution of Jews and a steady baseline of discrimination. In the Latin West, the area of the Roman Church, the approach of Chrysostom found expression in the repeated expulsions of Jews. From England in 1290, from France in 1306, and more permanently in 1390, from Spain in 1492, from Lithuania in 1495, and Portugal in 1497, from many German cities and states in the 16th century. By the way, expulsions were not confined to the Middle Ages. The Russian army in World War I blamed its losses against Germany on the Jews, and they expelled 200,000 Jews from Lithuania and Latvia in 1915. The segregationist ethos of Chrysostom is also behind the incarceration of Jews in ghettos, beginning with the ghetto of Frankfurt, Germany in 1462, and the ghetto of Venice in 1516. That is the historical episode from which the word ghetto comes. Ghetto, an Italian word meaning iron foundry, the name of the swampy and pestilential district where the Venetian ghetto was situated. And so it came to mean a place within Christian society where Jews were locked away. One of the hallmarks of the modern Western experience has been the political disestablishment of the church. In the wake of the French and the American revolutions, Jews began to become citizens of the new states. In that era, traditionalist Christians opposed the newfound acceptance of the Jew. The European experience is illustrative here. Since Napoleon Bonaparte had extended the French emancipation of its Jews to the other European countries he had conquered. When he was defeated, the diplomats gathered at the Congress of Vienna in 1815 revoked the emancipation of the Jews. It's a little bit like the end of Reconstruction in American history, when African Americans suddenly lost their rights effectively to vote, or to be elected, or to be part of the political mainstream. Jews did not regain their civic status in Germany until its unification in 1871. And then, as we have seen, modern anti-Semitism arose as a backlash against the normalization of the Jew in Christian society. That theme is still found in the rhetoric of some of the January 6, 2021 insurrectionists, the Proud Boys, to bring it all the way up to the present. Their leader, Nick Fuentes, has declared that America is a Christian nation and that it will cease to be America, quote, if it loses its white demographic core and if it loses its faith in Jesus Christ. While there are many more details that could be filled in, I'll conclude my historical review at this point. Fuentes' declaration is astonishing in its illogic. Jesus, the historic carpenter from Nazareth, came from my people, the very people rejected by the Proud Boys and their ilk, in the name of Christian nationalism. But then again, anti-Semitism is about fear. It's about anger. It's about the irrational urge to keep those who are different in their place, if not to destroy them completely. And the fourth point that a Christian really needs to know, that anti-Semitism thrives on the passivity of the non-anti-Semitic majority. Pointing out the irrational roots of anti-Semitism should remind us that it is like other forms of bigotry, which are likewise manifestations of irrational demons within human nature. If you don't call it out, if you don't oppose it, then people who associate with you, and certainly people who listen to you, will have that much less reason to reject it. The net result of wide-scale passivity is that the hatred of one group becomes part of the mainstream. This too has happened both on the left and the right in our contentious American society, and very much so within the past 5 years. I feel the words of Alfred Lord Tennyson describing the Light Brigade at the Battle of Balaclava have become true in a sense not intended by the author. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered. From the right, I am told that Jews are not true Americans. From the left, I am told that there is no place in this world for a Jewish state. This world, which has 24 majority Muslim countries, has no place for one Jewish state. From capitalists, I am told that Jews are radical socialist redistributionists. From communists, I am told that Jews are the arch capitalists. Louis Farrakhan, albeit denying that he's anti-Semitic, says in the same speech that Jews are Satan, the epitome of what is worst about white America. And certain NBA stars, celebrities in the minds of so many American youth, give his words an amen. At the same time, from the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, I am told that Jews are non-whites in disguise. All the more pernicious, because we can take off our skull caps and pass for white. I'm damned for this and I'm damned for that. I'm damned for what I do and I'm damned for what I don't do. I'm damned for people's frustrations and I'm damned for my existence. I'm confident that these positions do not characterize our congregation of faith, gathered physically and virtually in this space today. But these positions gain undeserved strength from the passivity of those who ought to be loudly opposing them. This thought leads directly to the outlines of what I offer as my concluding thought: what Christians need to do about anti-Semitism. First, take it seriously. It won't do to think that, well, Jews are haves and not have-nots, and therefore bigotry against them is less pressing. Today's microaggression makes it easier for tomorrow's macroaggression, first to be thinkable and then to be doable. And as we have seen, it is not only microaggressions that are addressed against Jews, not only bad jokes. In an era where our kosher food markets, where our community centers, where our synagogues require armed guards, we are way past the era of accepting anti-Jewish vulgarities as the price of a society guaranteeing freedom of speech. Second, what do we need to do? Educate yourselves, your circle of associates, and above all, your children. Anti-Semitism is not confined, of course, to ignorance of the Holocaust, but that topic provides a lens for seeing what's going on. Despite the widespread attention to teaching the Holocaust in the public school curriculum, there are glaring gaps in Americans' knowledge of critical facts related to it. This is important, not because the world is made better by the knowledge of factoids, but because the areas of ignorance threaten the exercise of responsible participation in democracy. In the 2019 Pew Research Center survey, 50% of the respondents did not know that Hitler came to power by democratic election. Voter apathy for the Jew is an existential challenge. This ignorance is also important because one of the tools of anti-Semites is Holocaust denial. And part of Holocaust denial is the allegation that Jews invented or exaggerated the Holocaust as a plot to advance Jewish interests. In that light, the 10% of Americans who say that the death toll was half or less of the actual 6 million are at risk of being co-opted by anti-Semitic Holocaust deniers. Teens know less about Holocaust than adults. That scares me when I think about our American future. In sharing these data about ignorance of aspects of the Holocaust, I am concerned not to give the impression that we adequately combat anti-Semitism by focusing on the evils of the Holocaust. Among the ranks of people who display anti-Semitic attitudes are those who staunchly condemn the Holocaust. They have respect for dead Jews, but that respect does not extend to living Jews. And finally, I've saved this point for last because it focuses specifically on what Christians, as Christians, need to do about anti-Semitism. Christians need to reaffirm, as only Christians can, the newer understanding of the meaning of Christianity as has been propounded in the ecumenical developments of the post-Holocaust era. To explain what I mean, I'll give one Protestant and one Catholic example. In 1983, on the 500th anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther, the Lutheran bishops of Scandinavia issued a statement affirming his importance for the development of Christianity, but they specifically disavowed his anti-Semitic writings. Indeed, there was what to disavow. In his tract from 1546, quote, "On the Jews and their lies," Luther gave the following counsel to Christian authorities. set fire to their synagogues or schools. Jewish houses should be razed and destroyed. Jewish prayer books and Talmudic writings in which idolatry, lies, cursing, and blasphemy are taught should be taken from them. Their rabbis should be forbidden to teach on pain of loss of life and limb. Safe conduct on the highways should be abolished completely for the Jews. All cash and treasure of silver and gold should be taken from them. Let a flail, an axe, a hoe, a spade be put into their hands, so that young, strong Jews and Jewesses could earn their bread by the sweat of their brow. Those are Luther's words. The bishops were saying that to be a good Christian, you need not be anti-Jewish. Actually, they were saying more, and this is why I applaud them. To be a good Christian, you must not be anti-Jewish. The Roman Catholic example is one generation older. During the papacy of Pope John the 23rd, the Roman Catholic hierarchy committed itself to a revolutionary reckoning with the outside world. The Church could not speak to the world if it did not attempt to respond to the seismic changes in life that characterized the modern era. For Jews, the most hopeful part of the Vatican II Church Council, as this was called, was the document Nostra Aetate, in our time, that became part of the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church in 1965. This statement called upon the Christian to regard the Jew as brother, not as other. As brother, not as other. While not soft-pedaling the theological differences between Christians and Jews, the Roman Catholic Church called upon Christians to move past a theology of supersessionism, to relate to the Jew with love instead of contempt, and to desist from missionizing Jews. Instead, trusting God for the realization of the Church's eschatological hopes regarding the ultimate achievement of a communion of the faithful. I note with concern that in the 21st century, there has been a significant degree of pushback within the Roman Catholic world against the openness to culture of Vatican II. I fear that the renegotiation of what it means to be the Church in the world may lead back to the bad old days of allowing anti-Semitism to take nourishment from the religious disagreements of Christian and Jew. But I am cheered to see that the sea change of attitude regarding the Jew within important and extensive sectors of the Christian faith community is so present, so vivid, so widespread. The fact that you have invited me to address you bears witness to that. I cannot hope for success in the defense of my people against anti-Semitism if Jews are marginalized, and if we are quietly despised or merely tolerated. My people need your open alliance. My people need your open alliance. You need it too. For me, it's a matter of life and safety. For you, this is critically important in a different way. Your souls are at stake. Shalom. And thank you.